This is Agent Provocateur with Alan Walsh and Adam Wilde.
Welcome to Agent Provocateur. It's been a pretty harrowing couple of days. We haven't done an episode in about 2.5, 3 weeks since just before the holidays in the World Juniors. Adam, it is wonderful to see you. How are you doing?
Well, it's great to see you. I'm perfectly fine. I think we were all sort of worried about you, and because everybody knows somebody in LA because there's so many people there. But you're our connection, and I think we were concerned about you and your family and your house. And can you tell us a little bit about what's going on in your week, Alan?
Sure. First, I want to thank everybody for reaching out. I received messages and phone calls from so many people I haven't talked to or seen in years and years and years have reached out. Thanks to you and Jesse and Steve for reaching out. I've been in touch with as many people as I can. The level of devastation in this city right now, a city that I moved to and I've been living in for the last 39 years, is just unimaginable. We've seen a lot of words used. I would use apocalyptic. The streets are deserted. Everything is closed down. The air is filled with smoke. You walk outside for just a few minutes, your throat starts burning, your eyes start burning. The air is not very healthy. You can see from the dog park about 2 blocks from our home, huge plumes of smoke in the air, filling the sky. The fires are still very much raging. The Palisades fire, which caused a lot of the devastation in the Palisades of Malibu, is only about 35% contained. And there's another fire out, they're calling it the Archer fire, that just popped up in Granada Hills in the valley. There's the Kenneth fire, which is a little bit more west in the valley, Hidden Valley, Calabasas area, Woodland Hills, and that's burning. There was a evacuation order just issued for Malibu, the other half of Malibu that had remained somewhat unscathed. So we're still very much not out of the woods, especially with the forecast of winds picking up tonight and over the weekend. The night that all of this broke out, just imagine really dry air, the winds start picking up. And in our neighborhood, the winds were going around 60, 70 miles per hour, which is hurricane level winds. Out on the coast, Palisades and Malibu area, the wind was going at 90 to 100 miles per hour. It was basically a hurricane without rain.
Yeah.
And with the air so dry, once something sparks somewhere, a lot of power lines were down. We had a power line just behind our house that kept sparking and making booming sounds. And, I laugh, but I had neighbors texting me and calling me like, what do we do? What do we do? And I'm just like, well, just be ready in case that comes down. There's going to be a fire in our neighborhood. And there's this huge, power cell right up there on the poles, swaying back and forth in the wind, sparking. It's terrifying. And that's going on all over the city.
Yeah. And there's been, there's so much to really cover. I think, from the outside, Alan, the way this gets covered and reaches people like us, it's like, well, this celebrity's house is gone and this celebrity's house is gone. But I think what we have to keep in mind is that for every celebrity, there's like 10,000 people that are not a celebrity who also lost their home, who
Right.
also, are displaced. We're talking about a fire the size of Manhattan Island, 14,000 acres. This seems like the type of event that could change a city completely forever. Is that the sense that you have?
There's no question. That's what we're in the midst of right now. This is an event that will change LA, will change Malibu, certainly Pacific Palisades, but the entire city. Mm-hmm. This entire city, there isn't anybody here that doesn't know somebody who's lost their home. We're just talking to people, and I have group chats with various friends around the city, and 4 or 5 times in the last 24 hours, somebody has put a message in that they lost their home, or their sister lost their home, or someone they know that we know has lost their home, and we're reaching out, offering whatever assistance we can. There's a gentleman in my neighborhood that I've become very friendly with his wife. They have a big white dog that looks very similar to my dog. He's a huge hockey fan, former agent at a Hollywood agency. And we end up just happenstance bumping into each other 4 or 5 mornings a week, walking our dogs. And we end up walking, like I do a 3 to 4 mile walk with my dog every morning. And we end up meeting up somewhere and just continuing our walk together. And he had 2 dogs today that look identical. and I'm like, yeah, your dog has a twin. Well, it's actually a sister who is living with friends of theirs, and the friends lost their homes, so he's taken the dog in. So now he's going to be walking 2 massive dogs every morning. That's the kind of interaction you have with people.
Right.
It's just everybody knows somebody who's lost their home. And in our situation, there's people that have been evacuated, and they don't know how their home, what the state of their home is right now as we speak.
And I've heard that, part of the issues that people are having even evacuating is that the roads are so clogged with cars that it can be hard to move. Right. Or at least it was that way for the first couple of days. And these things, I think, Alan, living in the North, we don't see it that often. Obviously, Alberta has its wildfires and that sort of thing. But in Ontario, we get a lot of rain. We don't see this stuff the same way that you would in a semi-arid climate. I don't think people realize how quickly these things can move. Like you're fine 1 second, and then the next, it's like you got 5 minutes to get out. Right.
Exactly. And that's what a lot of people were faced with. But again, the one thing I would like to get across to people is there are people that have reached out, listeners of ours, that I don't know, who have sent messages just hoping that me and my family are safe. All of the messages and expressions of concern are so appreciated. I've tried to get back to almost everybody, even listeners who've reached out and people I don't know. I've sent them messages thanking them for their concern. Everybody here in LA is feeling a certain sense of it almost feels like at the very beginning of the pandemic when everything shut down. I don't remember LA shut down since the pandemic, where the streets in many communities are pretty much deserted. All the businesses, restaurants are closed. Everybody's home watching, TV, hoping that these fires and the conditions and the wind that have caused all of this, get better. But there's a certain level of fear out there amongst the people living here. A lot of sadness, a lot of sadness. And again, it's still present tense. It's not over. Yeah. And that's, and my heart goes out to the people who have been more impacted than we have been. And we all just hope for the best.
Absolutely. One quick last question on the fires, because, I hate to be the guy that asked this question, but I think it is a relevant question. obviously you've got the wild card game between the Rams and the Vikings moved to Arizona for Monday. The Los Angeles Kings and Calgary Flames postponed a game. Sports is a way of bringing people together, and I have a feeling that when sports do come back to Los Angeles, that it will be a big rallying point. Do you have a sense of how the NHL and the NHLPA are going to handle this over the next couple of weeks?
I don't yet. I don't think they know.
Right.
I can tell you this. Calgary played in Anaheim as this all started. And the night of the first, the Palisades evacuations and when the fire there was out of control. And after the game, I was texting with players in Calgary. And I'm like, what's the plan? And they're like, well, we're getting on the bus and we're coming to LA. And I'm like, I wouldn't do that.
Right.
And they're like, well, like they know what's best. That's the plan. So the Calgary Flames bussed from Anaheim to LA that evening, checked into the hotel at LA Live. And as they were on the bus, I'm texting with players and I'm like, there's no way that game is going to be played tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And the general feeling amongst the team was, the games don't get postponed. Like
they never do.
That so very rarely happens. It'll get played. Well, the next morning, the Pasadena fire was going and all the way out to Altadena. And that's on the other side of downtown. And the players could stand outside the hotel or from their hotel rooms if they had a higher floor and see the smoke rising and flames out there. And all of downtown had a thick layer of smoke. Mm-hmm. And the players were given masks to cross the street to go into Crypto.com arena for morning skate. And they walked into the rink and the rink was full of smoke.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And that was it. That's when, a player texted me and said, the rink is full of smoke. I was like, game over, get out.
Yeah.
And they ended up busing, and it was the mom's trip.
Okay.
So the Calgary Flames had all their moms with them. Mm-hmm. And they ended up going out to LAX, got on their plane, and I think they sat on the runway for about 4 or 5 hours before being cleared for takeoff and getting out of Dodge.
Wow. So when you're living there and like my mom was a radio DJ in Idaho, right on the border between Idaho and Washington State when Mount St. Helens blew. And she has, she remembers the smell and the ash falling and that sort of thing. When you're walking through where you are in LA County, are you smelling it? Are you seeing it? Are you seeing clouds? Is it like, what is your day-to-day experience just on the ground?
Yeah, you can see plumes of smoke rising up over the hills. There's smoke in our neighborhood. No ash has fallen. Although there have been fires in the past where our whole neighborhood looks like it's snowing because of the ash, and the ash ends up, on your car, on your lawn, in front of your house, behind your house, in your pool, everywhere. There hasn't been any ash because of the direction the wind has been blowing. Mm-hmm. But the smoke is everywhere. Wow.
Well, Alan, you know what? I really appreciate you doing this show this week. I didn't even want to ask. To be honest with you, Alan was like, you guys want to do a show this week? And I had kind of filed away in my mind. I'm like, I'm not even going to ask Alan this week. This seems like a little bit of a crazy week. So I'm glad we're doing it. Let's turn to hockey because this is the thing that makes us all happy. And some really great news for one of your clients and a guest of the show, friend of the show, Filip Hronek, who I believe is now, he's made the team in Abbotsford. And he will officially be an Abbotsford Canuck forever, right? That's what he's going to do.
That's right. A lot of confusion about conditioning loans and Filip Hronek. Mm-hmm. So he and I have been in very close communication with the club, and Vancouver has been, their training staff have been amazing in planning out altogether his return to play. He's getting closer and closer every day. So we were all faced with a dilemma. Vancouver's leaving, well, left, but they were leaving to go out on a fairly lengthy road trip, and he's ready to skate with the team. Rather than have him travel with the team, where there are literally no practices except for morning skates, where players will be on the ice for, just 15, 20 minutes, wanting to have full practices and be out on the ice for an hour. Abbotsford's an hour and a half away from where Phil lives. For a conditioning loan, the player needs to consent. There's absolutely zero issues in Filip saying, no, I don't want to go. He wants to go to Abbotsford and practice with the team as he is rehabbing from this injury and wants to get back as soon as possible. It makes a lot of sense for everybody. So we put through the paperwork on the conditioning loan. Everybody's on the same page. Vancouver announces it. And Vancouver hockey media, Canucks media, as they tend to be, the loudest media in the NHL marketplace and the most misinformed. And let's just leave it at that. Never have so many people, all right, have been so loud on so many issues that they absolutely know nothing about. But I leave it at that.
Alan, we get accused of the same thing in Toronto. I'm not going to lie. I think Montreal's got a problem with that too. One day, I want you to power rank the media markets, and I don't know what the context would be. I don't want to say difficult because it's not difficult, but what are the most intense media markets? And I know they're all a little bit different. Edmonton's different, Vancouver's different, New York's different, Boston's different. But is Vancouver really the loudest media market in the country in the game?
There are times where I sit there and I'm watching some of the comments, by the media there, and I'm like, this guy doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. This guy doesn't have any idea what, they're talking about issues with authority and it's like, no, it doesn't work like that. Or no, the CBA doesn't allow that. Or I'm going like, really? People are really? I mean, sometimes anyways. We can have a chuckle about it.
Yeah,
we can have a chuckle about it. Of course. And I'm saying it tongue in cheek. I don't mean to cast aspersions on any particular person, but come on, if you're going to be commenting on this stuff, at least have an idea of what you're talking about. Well, it's sort of like we get into like tax issues. And that's another issue that seems to be in the media these days. I've seen so many comments from people who have no idea how athlete taxes work. We've done whole shows on this, right?
Yes.
We've had Sean Packard on, and people are commenting with authority. I'm reading, taxes in Canada are voluntary. I'm like, what? I see this stuff. I'm like, I'm putting it away. I'm not even reading this stuff anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because, the information is out there, but they might have to listen to an hour of Agent Provocateur.
They have to.
That would require some research. One thing, actually, I think this brings a good question up because I don't even know the answer to this question is, can you just look up the CBA? Is that available publicly?
Yeah, it's available online. That? Sure. In fact,
it's pretty dry, but
in fact, hang on one second here. This is how close it is. Here we go.
Is your mic literally sitting on a copy of the CBA?
It is.
That's funny. That's cool. Wow.
I want to multitask and get the most use I possibly can out of the CBA. Now, here's what a lot of people don't know. The only CBA we have was written and released in 2013. The CBA that was done during the pandemic, they call it the CBA, but it really is a 92-page memorandum of understanding. And the idea, the way it's supposed to work is then the memorandum of understanding is incorporated into a new CBA with the existing 2013 CBA, and the MOU references specific provisions and articles of the 2013 CBA and revises certain sections. So when issues come up as a lawyer, what we do is we have to go to the MOU, scroll through the MOU, and find whether there is a revision to a specific article, and then reference back to the 2013 CBA. It was all supposed to be incorporated into one new document. And both sides, from the pandemic agreement in 2020, 2021, we're now 2025, we're already starting soon to negotiate a new CBA. Both sides are still working to put that final document together on the old CBA.
Wow. And we have a new one hopefully coming sometime this year, right? Like they're going to start negotiating that. What do they say? Marty Walsh and Gary Bettman were talking about maybe some soft negotiations, formations, something like that.
Yeah. So I'm hoping when they finally come to an agreement on that one, they could finally get, everything together into a new document so that I don't have to sit there and reference, the MOU, the transition rules from the pandemic agreement, and the 2013 CBA, which 90% of that document is still in operation and still in force.
But there's a chance that some clause that you're looking at is out of date, which is kind of crazy. So you're referencing two documents. That's wild. Wow. Yeah. Well, I mean, knowing you though, you'd probably have it memorized anyway, back of your hand, that kind of stuff. I've always meant to read it. I've read pieces of it, but I've never actually sat down and read the whole thing because I feel like I'd fall asleep a few times, but it is kind of important to know. Now, Alan, there's a couple of things in that CBA that are being exploited, and that's sort of what you do in sports, right? You look at the rules and you go, where are the holes? How do I find my way through? I'm a big Formula One fan. Every 5 or 6 years, they change the regulations or they update the regulations. And it's the engineer's job to go in and go, oh, they didn't think about that. Well, that could give us a competitive advantage. And the NHL, like the Formula One seems to welcome that. The NHL seems to not welcome that. They don't love that when you do that because it seems as though they feel like, oh, this makes us look bad. One of the things that's come up that we're pretty sure the NHL head office is not thrilled about is salary deferral, which has been a feature of this since the first year-long lockout in 2005. Right. And so
deferrals have been in the CBA, the ability to defer in its present form since 2005. Continue.
So how does it? Just so everybody knows, because when Frank Vetrano, and I know he's not your client, but we have the Leafs did a deal with Jake McCabe with deferred salary. Seth Jarvis really kicked that off with the Carolina Hurricanes this summer as well. Now we have Frank Vetrano. I know we'll get into the merits of doing it or not, but how does it work? Does Anaheim actually get a break on the salary cap? And is there any sort of recapture later?
Okay, there is no recapture later. From a player's standpoint, the concept is this: you are signing a contract and or playing in a high tax jurisdiction, and you intend to retire. And at the time that you're receiving the deferrals are in a low tax jurisdiction. So if you are playing in California and intend to retire to Montreal, to Quebec, it probably doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
If you are playing in California and intend to stay in California, where the state income tax rate is at a maximum over 14% over and above the federal tax rate, which is approximately 37%, right? That wouldn't make any sense. But if you are playing in California and you have intention to retire to, say, Florida, where there is zero state income tax, or Nevada, where there is zero state income tax, you're hoping that by deferring the money, a couple of things, you have forced savings, right? So you have a guaranteed income stream sometime later in life, and you'll be receiving that money and paying significantly less tax on it. Okay? So that is if you're not going to be in a low or no state jurisdiction when you contemplate receiving the deferred money, it really doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And I would argue that for various reasons, I could see why a player wants to do this in certain circumstances. I don't like it.
Yep.
I don't think it benefits the player at all. And I'll say very quickly why. The club is paying money out. Let's forget about players, forget about specific clubs. Let's just say fact situation for our hypothetical, a player is getting $3 million a year for 3, 4, 5 years and is deferring $3 million a year for 3, 4, or 5 years. And the deferred money is going to be paid out starting in 10 years in equal payments every year. Okay. That's our scenario that we're going to be dealing with. No players, no clubs, just that scenario. And he's going from a high tax jurisdiction like a California team and going to intends to retire to a no state income tax jurisdiction. Okay. What are the issues? Well, there's the rate of inflation. Okay. And that is very much hand in hand with the time value of money. If the S&P 500 has grown historically since the end of World War II at the rate of 10% a year, historically, some years have been down, sometimes several years in a row have been down, but the historical average since 1945 is 10%. So let's go even more conservative than that, right? You don't want that much market risk. You don't want that. So let's just say 5%. Okay. Money growing at 5% and the rate of inflation, let's say historically it's been at 2.5%. Let's go a little higher maybe. Right. But you can assume 2%. It can be 3%. It could be 3.5%. There's a lot of people who think over the next 10 years, inflation is going to be a constant issue that United States federal government is going to be dealing with. Okay. So as time goes by, most people can understand the concept. $1 million today is worth more than $1 million in 10, 15, and 20 years.
Absolutely.
Okay. So if there is no interest factor attached to the deferral, and there isn't in all the players that we're talking about, there's 4 that have had money deferred, and there's a whole host of reasons why. Their player is not receiving the money plus interest. It's just, here's the money deferred. It's split up into, let's say, 10 payments, one payment a year. And the reason why is that there's a lot of hoops that have to be jumped through to have that money classified into a bucket of qualified retirement plan to be able to legally avoid certain taxes. Okay.
Yep.
If some of these assumptions don't pan out, and one of them is federal law changing,
yes,
or California law changing, and California Franchise Tax Board has been very aggressive in going after athletes in all sports for money with very little connection to the state of California, to having played in the state of California and negotiated a contract while you're in the state of California, receive money under that deal. There are, I'm sure, a million very well-heeled and knowledgeable tax experts who would sign off and say, this is going to be okay. This tax scheme is going to be okay down the road. Mm-hmm. I know just as many who say, now let's talk about the risks. Mm-hmm. And the risk is that after you go through all of this, the law changes. And there's a very significant contract out there that we've done a whole episode talking about.
Yes.
The Ohtani contract, right? Where the Franchise Tax Board is already looking at ways to get their hands into the deferral there. If there are other athletes who've deferred for several $1 million, they're going to try to find a way to break the veil and go after those contracts. So imagine being in retirement 10 years down the road, and all of a sudden you have been assessed by the state of California. They're going after their share of taxes on the deferral. Mm-hmm. And you need, as a player, to hire lawyers, pay lawyers, and fight this out in court against the Franchise Tax Board for years. Mm-hmm. Not really what I think players want to be doing in retirement.
No.
Okay.
It's a cost, right? There's sunk cost to that.
Right. So there are many people, and I've had this debate with many people in the last week. Most GMs I've talked about on this are very much against it for many reasons. What is a team in California? What's their motivation? Well, this is a home run for them, right? Because what teams will do is, and all the way back to the famous deferred contract case, and that's Bobby Bonilla.
Of course.
Is buy an annuity, and they are going to pay about 60 cents on the dollar, and the club has no risk, mm-hmm. right? The club is going to pay this money out in the future. They've purchased an annuity to pay it out on 60 cents on the dollar. For the club, this is a home run with no risk.
Yes.
Why else would the club want to do this?
Exactly.
Well, any club is a couple of reasons why. They are out there in the marketplace July 1 trying to sign players. And they are, I think many of them in California, in Canada, are sick and tired of the narrative that players don't want to play for them because of the higher taxes. And they are very loudly doing this to show players, other players who may be unrestricted free agents in the future. Mm-hmm. We have ways of working with you where you can avoid paying California state income tax if you defer. And this is great for you. You've got a forced savings. You've got a guaranteed stream of income down the road in retirement. All you got to do is retire to a no state income tax jurisdiction, and you're going to be saving millions in taxes today.
So what are the implications? Because as a fan, where you go is, okay, well, what does this mean for my salary cap, for my team's salary cap? Well, what does it count?
Well, the cap is discounted. The deferral is discounted, and there's a formula in the CBA to calculate what the AAV is, and on a $6 million AAV contract. Well, let me restate that. On $6 million being paid out, $3 million in compensation paid out during the season and $3 million deferred. The actual AAV is something like $4.5 million.
Wow. So that's a significant
So there's
discount.
a $1.5 million saving. And a lot of people ask, when the player is receiving his deferred money down the road, there is zero cap implication to the team.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So let me ask you this. Okay, so the player in specific circumstances, and it seems like in this particular case, the Ducks are signaling to the NHL, hey, we're not selling anymore. And that was the big story around Frank Vatrano. It's like, hey, this guy could have been a huge piece at the trade deadline for assets, but no, they want to start keeping guys and getting better now. They've got a really good farm system out there and that sort of thing.
But you're saying that. I'm not talking about any particular player, but I'm not talking about any particular team. You're saying that, not me.
Not you. No, that's who people I've been talking to are saying, oh, that's the Ducks going, we're done with this selling off thing. We're building now. Okay. And so, I guess my question is, if it's a home run for the team and the player wants it, why does head office not like it?
It's messy.
Okay. So it's just messy.
It's messy. And I think the league is concerned that the deferral is going to start being used in ways that are intended more as a salary cap circumvention than as a deferral.
Of course.
Right? So that's why any club contemplating this is going to have to be in very close contact with the league and work with them from the very beginning on the structure and how the deferral is going to be paid out and when and how much in relation to the overall dollars in the deal to get the league to sign off on it, which is a cumbersome process. Something the league doesn't really have time for or care to be involved in. I know that going all the way back to the days of Bob Goodenow, he was not a fan of deferred contracts, and the PA has never really been a fan historically of deferred deals. So there has been some speculation out there already that in the next CBA negotiation, both sides who aren't huge fans of deferred comp might just close the door on it completely, so it's no longer an issue going forward.
Right. Okay. Because it just sounds like it's a bit of a pain in the ass for everybody. So that's a really a succinct, fascinating way to look at it. And there are so many reasons why you want your money up front. There are so many reasons why you want your money up front. But teams like the Leafs are going to use everything they can to get around that cap and do more with their money. So it'll be fascinating to see what happens, especially with the cap rising as much as it is. And Alan, we still don't have any word on what the salary cap is going to be going next year. Do we?
Do you want some breaking news?
Yes, I want some breaking news.
Okay. You heard it from me. I'm telling you right now, you can write it down. All right. I am not divulging any confidences here. I'm not divulging any inside information per se, but I am telling you right now, the upper limit, the salary cap next year will be $97 million. Write it down, put it in the bank. It's coming. That's the number, $97 million.
So we finally have an answer. Alan, I can't wait till that's confirmed by the league. Thank you for the breaking news.
All right.
That's great. That's fantastic. The last thing I wanted to talk to you about while we have you is this, from our perspective up here in Canada, the fiasco that was the World Juniors, from your perspective with your clients, a really successful tournament. Speaking specifically for Leaf fans, Miroslav Holinka had a really good tournament, but you have some other players. Adam Juracek was on that Czech team. He had a good tournament. The Czech team had a good tournament. What was your experience at the World Juniors this year? And then I am going to ask you a little bit about Hockey Canada, because I think there's some confusion about how things are run, how things are done, and how this team ended up this way with this many good players left off the roster. So what was your experience on the ground? Because I know you go every year.
Yeah, and I was in Ottawa from the 26th until the 31st. I got to see all the players that we work with, got to take many of them out for dinner various times, met with all the parents who traveled, many from great distances, parents from Germany, parents from Czech Republic, parents from Slovakia, parents from all across Canada. So it's a great tournament with a lot of spirit.
Yeah.
It's a tournament I look forward to every year. I don't think I've missed a World Juniors since I got into the business, and this is my 30th year.
Wow.
So I've been to a lot of World Juniors. We had Bob McKenzie on once just to talk about World Juniors and his memorable ones and some great stories from the World Juniors. So overall, it was a great tournament from a personal perspective, from an enjoyment perspective, from clients doing well perspective, but not a great tournament if you're a huge supporter of Canada.
No. And for anybody that doesn't already know, this story has been played out, beaten to death, frankly. But there were certain players, and I think of specifically of Beckett Seneca, and third overall pick, not even invited to camp, and then there was an injury, and they sort of invited him. There were issues with the head coach saying that the players were tired, or that there was nothing that he could do about them and the penalties they were taking, and to instill any sort of discipline. Dave Cameron took a lot of heat, Alan. And Hockey Canada took a lot of heat, not taking players because they play in the USHL instead of the CHL. At least those are the rumors. How political is Hockey Canada with this process, both in picking players and picking coaching staff?
It's an extreme for anyone who thinks that politics are not involved here. It's an extremely political organization. The way they put teams together are extremely political. Now, having said that, I know personally many of the people involved who scout for Hockey Canada. I can tell you that Al Murray is one of the best scouts I have ever known and one of the most professional. And he's done an incredible job over the years with the LA Kings as director of amateur scouting there. He did an incredible job with Tampa as director of amateur scouting. And I believe for a while, he was also assistant GM and director of scouting. I mean, just an incredible person, incredible scout. But overall, the organization, right, is a fairly rotten organization with some very bad people in high positions, positions of power, and they enforce their own personal belief system on the way this thing should be run. And anyone who thinks the best players are invited to the camps and the best players from the camps are selected to the team, it don't work like that. And it hasn't worked like that for a very, very long time. And I think that Canada had produced so many dominant and elite players for so long that, Canada wins, and everyone associated with the team at the management and above level in the organization has a certain level of arrogance and swagger to them with all the wins. And now that not selecting the best players and overall allowing the politics to infuse into every aspect of the team's performance on the ice. And now the everything is sort of caught up with them. And now you see a lot of people making excuses, holding press conferences where what they say just enrages people in its delusion. Yeah. Right. Just some delusional comments in some where the head of the organization is compelled to call another press conference for the next day to clean up everything that was said the day before.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and unable to give satisfactory answers either, right? I mean, what's interesting about the way the process is handled, Alan, is there's very little knowledge of how the process is handled. All we have are, TSN. I remember when I was growing up, they used to do that where they knocked on their hotel room and said, "Hey, you made the team," and like that was very special, whatever. But we don't actually know how they break this stuff down. And for the people that I talk to who talk about country by country programs, the ones that really stick out as the ones that are the cutting edge, USA, Germany gets a lot of it because of their rise. Obviously, you look at teams like, in Finland, Latvia beat Canada. There are more people in the city I live in than live in the entire country of Latvia, right? And I'm not saying that Latvia beats Canada 5 times out of 10, but it still happened. Finland's a small country. Sweden's a smaller country. They're all punching above their weight. Canada has 40 million people, and we do produce some of the best talent in the world. It seems like we handcuffed ourselves. And I wonder if 2 quarterfinal losses in a row is enough to spur change, because in other instances, in other areas that are off the ice, it took a lot for any sort of change to happen at the top of Hockey Canada. I wonder what it will take on the ice. I have heard people say that the Canadian hockey program could be 15 to 20 years behind in terms of development. The USA players, for instance, play together from when they're young kids, right? There's always a chemistry. Canadian hockey players, it's like, yeah, you're there, and I guess you'll see each other when you're 17. What's your assessment of kind of what I've told you here? Is that somewhat accurate?
Oh, yeah. And what's interesting, for lack of a better word, is the very people responsible for the decline of Hockey Canada's performance, Team Canada's performance, particularly at this tournament, right, are the people now saying, you've got to charge us with fixing it. Right. Well, you're the people responsible for this mess. Yeah. And now you're the people claiming that only you know how to fix it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the thing. And now the great thing is nobody's going to talk about it. We got the 4 nations and we got the trade deadline and then playoffs after that. The next time this maybe comes up is during the draft. So these guys can go and hide, right? It's only a 2-week tournament.
Right.
How likely do you think there will be some change? Because this is ultimately a government-funded organization through sponsorship as well. So in its nature, pretty bureaucratic. Do you think there's going to be any change?
The people that are now responsible for what's gone on are incredibly well embedded into the bureaucracy.
Okay.
And it's going to take a lot to drag these people out of their offices kicking and screaming and kick them to the curb and bring in new more competent people who have some vision and know where to start in fixing all this.
Right. Okay. Very interesting. Now, I wanted to speak specifically, because I'm a Leaf fan, about Mr. Hronek. Because
Yes.
I saw his name came up a lot during the tournament. I want to talk about Adam Juracek as well. Adam obviously was drafted last year. So was Miroslav. But when you have clients playing in this tournament, how much does it affect their draft order? This 2-week span, how key is it to them moving up or down in the draft order?
Well, most players here have been drafted already.
Right.
So they've been drafted.
Okay.
It's an important tournament in their overall development, and certainly an important tournament in the process of going from a drafted player to signing your entry-level contract. Now, Adam Juracek actually signed his entry-level contract the evening he was drafted.
Wow.
Okay. Right. So he was the first player in the entire draft to actually sign his entry-level contract. And that's great for him. Mm-hmm. And St. Louis, they had an idea of where they wanted Adam to play this year. And they wanted to just, hey, we drafted him 16th overall. We know we're going to sign him. Let's just sign him right now.
Right.
Good on them. Right.
Yeah, no kidding.
Good on them. Right. But a player like Miroslav, certainly, the Leafs watch him in every game he plays carefully. He's playing with Edmonton in the Western Hockey League. I know that Brad Treliving traveled to the World Juniors in Ottawa to see Leaf prospects that they've drafted play. Mm-hmm. And certainly Miroslav was one of them that he wanted to keep a close eye on. And the expectation will be at the end of this season, we're going to have a conversation with Toronto about an entry-level contract. So this tournament and how one plays in this tournament certainly has bearing on the next step in the process. What do you think Toronto fans are in for with a guy like Miroslav Hronek? Like, for anybody that didn't catch the Czech games, maybe only caught Canadian games or caught one, or what do we expect this guy to be? Well, the question is going to be where he plays next year. Mm-hmm. He is eligible based on being drafted from Europe. He is eligible to play in the American Hockey League next year. So does he play with the Marlies? Does he go back to Europe? Does he play another year of junior? Those are all things that are going to be discussed at some point in time, with the most important criteria to that being, where should the player be where he will develop the best next year? And where will that development year fit within the overall arc of his entire development, leading up to hopefully one day playing in the NHL? That's what we're all looking at. And the conversation between player, agent, and club, we're all very much aligned, right? We discuss, we talk about the options, we express opinions, and almost always the route that is ultimately decided upon is mutual. And everyone is in agreement. This is the way we're going to go here. And you're making these decisions arm in arm and lockstep with the club. Like most things that we're doing, the times that you're not in agreement with the club might only be 2 or 3% of the time. But that's the time that gets the most noise and the most attention, right? Yes. Most of the time you're aligned with the club. Everybody sort of wants the same thing. The club wants the player to play well. The agent wants the player to play well. The club wants the player to develop into an NHL player. The agent wants that as well. The player wants that as well. We're all working together to get the player to that sweet spot. Right. But I think that for Leaf fans, what you're going to see down the road is a guy who has a very high hockey IQ. He's a great playmaker. He's got a pro shot. He's performed really well in making the transition from Europe to the Western Hockey League, and is playing on their top line, is producing. He's on their power play. He's producing, and the sky's the limit for a player like that.
That's awesome. Well, Alan, we're looking forward to him in blue and white, whether it's Toronto AHL or Toronto NHL, hopefully both eventually. But listen, Alan, thank you for making the time today. Again, I wasn't expecting to do an Agent Provocateur this week, so I'm glad that we got the chance to do it. I'm glad you and your family are all right. And just want to say on a personal note, because we love you, we're just thoughts are with you, and wishing you the best through this. And I hope that the wind dies down and they get this stuff under control.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for your messages, you, Jesse, and Steve, and everybody who've reached out, to all the listeners who've reached out. It really means a lot to me and my family, and it's very much appreciated. And on one final note, maybe you want to talk about the live Agent Provocateur we're going to be having us later in the month.
That's right. So we are we're going to London, Ontario.
Yes, we are.
Ivy School of Business, which is kind of neat because when have we? I've never had the chance to speak at a business school before, but we're going to be doing a live episode. You can get your tickets at it's the Ivy Sports Leadership Conference is what it's called. You can get your tickets now. They're about $30, and it's going to be on a Saturday, January 25th, between 3 and 6. And this conference isn't just you and I, Alan. It's hosted annually at Ivy, and the mission is to connect students with sports industry leaders. So there are plenty of leaders at this. So, we're going to have fun and do a great show, but there's also going to be some other spectacular people to see. And if you're into sports at all, you want to break into the industry, or you just want to be entertained and ask some questions, this might be the place for you.
Yep. Sounds great. Look forward to it. Look forward to seeing you there.
Yes,
Look
sir.
forward to seeing Jesse there.
Yes.
And so what's the date and time again?
It's going to be in the afternoon of January 25th, Saturday.
All right. It's coming up soon.
We can leave the ticket link in the actual bio of this show, so you can click on it and buy one if you want.
Sounds great. All right. Thanks, everybody. See you next week. Be safe. Hug your loved ones. And we'll be seeing you soon.
This has been Agent Provocateur with Alan Walsh and Adam Wilde. Follow Alan Walsh on Twitter @WalshA. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts by searching Agent Provocateur and hitting the subscribe button. YouTube.com/SDPN.